Hi, this is Michael. Welcome to week 4. So, a little recap and a little coaching overall for week 3. You remember our pyramid, and I can go back to Canvas, and as you'll see in each week, we're going to try to move up the pyramid one step. And each of those steps takes a certain amount of effort and understanding. So, we're this week, and you'll see this pattern repeated, which is that we tend to have a week where we're really thinking about and puzzling over how to make sense of something, and then the next week we're actually applying some practical techniques. So this week is that time to apply a technique. The work that I saw here was about understanding the data itself, and one thing I believe that is important as we move forward is the universality of your topic and the data that you have. So in any case where a group of data that you have is about you, that's a finite amount of information, and you don't need any particular information architect techniques to organize things yourself. However, if you were to make, for example, a to-do app, that's a thing that's many of those are out there, you have to start to think much more universally about the data that you capture and be more open to different sorts of use cases. So that was this week. You want to think about universalizing it, making it bigger, such as I did, instead of saying, hey, these finite amount of chemicals are what I'm going to organize. I actually am more interested in what do you get from them? What kind of smells do you get? What kind of combinations does that provide? And that's where a place like Fragrantica, if you got to take a look at this, is pretty amazing, because there's just so much stuff here. It's thousands upon thousands of records and a lot more complexity. So one other thing that we're going to discover a little bit more about what goes into this field, but how do you group things? If all of your records are unique, meaning they're absolutely standalone, you have no ability to do any sort of organization. However, if you start to see patterns, things, this is like this, then that's the ability to be able to scale, which is extremely important. Also, in your data, what would you say is important? What makes, like in a tweet, the tweet is pretty much important, but there are other things such as the person who did it is also important. So I want you to think about hierarchy, as you did. And of course, we want to think of usefulness, but before we get there, you do need to continue to add fields and delete fields because you got it from someplace. But at this point, forget where you got it from. That is where someone else did all the work for you. Now you need to do the work. So you'll have to sort of start with this blank slate, but yet you're not starting from scratch. And you're looking for patterns, but you might also have to invent them. So a lot of discussion here, as well as how can you support any sort of action from a person other than yourself. So you want to think about usefulness. So these are all big picture thought process that you go through when you get some data. And again, this is very normal whenever you get something to organize that you want to study and understand how are you representing what you are organizing. And can you change that organization? Yes, you should, especially if you're working in a company or something. You may need to invent new fields just so that you can have ability later to design experiences. So that being said, let's see, is there anything else? I think I did adjust dates and times. I want to reiterate that most of the iteration in this class is going to need to happen early in the week. Likely Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is the best time if you're looking to really do a good job and not work too hard to get immediate feedback either from me or from others in the class. If you're getting your feedback later in the week, it is going to be problematic because you don't have time to adjust it as we move to the next topic. So please, it's always best to engage earlier rather than later. And I adjusted the times just to make sure that I do grade on Tuesdays. So there is no activity and no feedback available on Tuesdays. I'd also say Mondays is just in case you're really pressed for time and have to get some feedback. So this week absolutely is a good time to work early because we're going to learn HTML. And at the end of the week, you're going to actually submit your HTML exercise. So let's take a look at this week's exercise, which is taking HTML and applying it to give some meaning to your data. And that meaning is going to be not visual at all, and that's the whole point. It's going to be semantic meaning, meaning it's going to offer a lot of information about what your data really is without having to worry so much or even be concerned about what it looks like. And whether you will appreciate this or not, you will actually be turning your data into information once you add HTML markup. And that means not necessarily that it actually will make it readable by a human, may not look pretty, but it will be readable by a computer, which means readable by Google. And believe me, Google loves using semantic markup to give meaning and understand what the page is about. So there's a lot to unpack, so be sure to read the Canvas module, which I will describe as much as possible. And I want to give just a few tips right now. Please read first. There are a few articles here that are also referenced. I will say, if you aren't familiar with Brad Frost, it's really good to take a look here and say he invented this concept for designers called atomic design. And it just gives you the understanding a little bit about how this markup is actually helpful in building bigger and more powerful data structures, bigger sites, etc. There's also some stuff about semantics. There's a little thing here, which is a movie talking about how HTML design has changed. So how do you learn HTML? Well, the good thing is it's just English. And so here's a cheat sheet. You can see here, these are all the tags. There's really not many of them, and most of them are not interesting. I'm focusing here that the biggest ones that you need to really think about are headers, and that has to do specifically with your data. We talked about it last week, what's important. Secondly, grouping. Can you group things together into meaningful groups using these new tags, which are called HTML5 tags? Article, for example, is a really good example of use that as your main one record. You know, we talk about our records and rows. So an article is what I use. In fact, I give you a template here, which you can take a look at, which will show you the first record is just the names of your headers, just so I can get oriented as to what they are and kind of get you used to this. Here is a name, and then you end it. So this is just a convention you need to learn in HTML, beginning and end, and the thing in between is the data. Now, these look pretty good, and these certainly JS Fiddle doesn't mind them, but this is not HTML. There is actually a kind of HTML where you can make up your own tags, but we're not interested in that. What I do next is then I say, okay, here I just said I'm going to use article, so you can see here, article starts here. Let's get this out of the way, and ends here. So this is one record, article to article. You're welcome to use article. You can use, there's some others you can use. In a sense, there's no right or wrong tag to choose as long as you do it meaningfully. Within that is a bunch of my records, and that includes a header. It also includes this thing called an aside, which also includes a thing called details. So this is really what I'm looking for. Can you group your data together and give some HTML goodness to what parts of the record itself, what goes together, what means something? And then you're just going to repeat it a couple of times. So this week when you're getting feedback, don't worry about repeating it. Just do one record. I would like to get this, though, just so I can make sure I remember your fields. But yes, one record, and then for the actual assignment, you just repeat it twice, and as you can see, you'll just change the data to another record. It's just to get you used, pardon me, to repeatability. One thing that's really important, though, is don't be all concerned about what it looks like. It's not interesting, and it's not part of this assignment. That's how it renders in a browser, which is a wholly different topic. And why are we doing this? Well, one thing, you got your data because the people who created that structured it in a particular way. A really great example is this. The brilliant people at Mural, when I paste in a URL, it goes to the page and it manages to do things like find, if it's marked up properly, this picture. It also has a header, which it finds, and then it has some details, which it finds, and so forth. So this is a perfect example of what you would create with your HTML, the ability for another site or even a design later to be applied to your markup. And you will actually be visualizing your markup later in the class. So this is the time when you're really making the decisions about what's important, etc. And I think it's the perfect way to introduce the idea of moving into information without having to think about design. So that's the goal for this week. Share early. I'll be happy to give feedback, and enjoy.